Welcome to the Celiac Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Lucia Cordaro, and this is where we get real about life with celiac disease. Each week, I'll share practical gluten-free tips, wellness hacks, and honest conversations about the emotional side of living with an autoimmune condition. Think of this as your weekly mix of support, relatability, and inspiration to help you not just survive, but thrive with celiac. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, I'm not a medical professional. Everything I share is based on my own experience living with celiac disease. This podcast is not medical advice, so please always consult your doctor about your own health. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Celiac Diaries. I'm your host, Lucia Cordaro, and I'm so excited to chat with you guys today. It's a very cozy, rainy day in New York City, so perfect time to just hop on over to the podcast studio and get on the mic. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. Definitely go check out my first two episodes. The first one was just kind of an intro to this podcast, the vision and purpose behind it, and my celiac disease story. And then the last episode was very, very niche and specific, but it was all about how I use ChatGPT to help manage celiac disease in an easier way. So definitely check out those two episodes if you're curious. Before I get into everything, just a little personal update at the beginning of the podcast. I've been having such a busy week. I'm in between trips right now. Last week, I went to Vail, which was so fun. And then Friday, which is in a couple days, I'm leaving again to go to Louisiana for an LSU football game, which is also going to be so fun. Two very different vibes, but we're keeping travel integrated into my life, even with celiac. And I actually have tips for how I do that in my last episode, all about utilizing ChatGPT to make those travel itineraries and researching gluten-free restaurants and spots easier. So another plug for that episode, but I'm really excited for all of these trips. I also really want to do like little short form videos on my Celiac Diaries pod Instagram and TikTok pages for when I go on little trips like this, to show you guys the restaurants that I'm eating at that are celiac safe and the gluten-free options that I found, in case you guys have upcoming travel to these really cool places too. So be on the lookout for those. I always think those are fun videos to watch. And I also will always be sharing all of the gluten-free restaurants and spots that I'm going to in New York City and doing little videos about that and what I eat in a days. So definitely follow Celiac Diaries Pod on Instagram and my own Instagram if you haven't yet. It's a good time, and let me know also if you have any episode requests or ideas. Feel free to DM me at Celiac Diaries Pod. Just wanted to get that little plug in there at the beginning of the episode, but today we are digging into something a little bit deeper. We're talking all about anxiety and how it relates to celiac disease, specifically getting into my personal experience with it. And really, when I think of celiac and anxiety, it's a twofold issue. There's one, anxiety as a neurological symptom of celiac disease. Yes, you heard that correctly. Anxiety is a symptom of celiac disease. I didn't know that for the longest time, and when I found that out, I was like, everything makes sense now. And then two, there's anxiety as a result of managing celiac disease and trying to live the gluten-free lifestyle. So there's two different ways that anxiety can really come up with celiac disease. And they're two separate issues, but I'm going to tackle both in this episode. And hopefully it'll just leave you guys feeling validated and less alone in how anxiety shows up with celiac disease. And I'm also going to leave you guys with some inspiration and takeaways of how I've been able to manage anxiety with celiac disease, because honestly, I've pretty much gotten to a point where I don't feel anxious about celiac disease because of the frameworks that I've developed in my life with trial and error. So I'm going to get into those too. Just another disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional. Anxiety is something that can be, very serious. So always seek professional help if you really need that. I'm just kind of speaking from my own personal experience here. All right, with that being said, we're going to do our weekly segments to kick off the episode. So first up, we have our news of the week. So for this week's celiac news, I wanted to share a new study that I think a lot of us will find super relatable, and it's tied to celiac and anxiety. Researchers have been looking at something called gastrointestinal anxiety, which is essentially the fear and stress tied specifically to digestive symptoms. in people with IBS and people with gluten-related disorders. So if you don't have celiac disease, this could also be something that affects you. Essentially, they ran this study using a questionnaire called the Visceral Sensitivity Index to measure how this kind of anxiety shows up. And they found out that it's actually a real measurable form of anxiety. It's not just general worry or stress. So the results showed that people with gluten-related disorders who had higher gastrointestinal anxiety tended to have more frequent symptoms, worse mood, and just a lower overall mental well-being. So that constant stress about food or cross-contamination really does catch up to people, which is what we're going to get into in this entire episode. But it's so validating that there's actually like a research study that's uncovering this. It's not just people sharing their experiences about it. So the researchers found that this type of anxiety is different from regular anxiety or depression. It's more about the body and symptom anticipation. You're like eating something and then you're immediately trying to see if it accidentally had gluten and assessing how your stomach feels. This study is interesting. I'll link the full article from celiac.com in the show notes if you want to dig deeper into it. But just some call outs. It wasn't a completely perfect study. It relied on self-reported diagnoses and was mostly women, but it's still an important step in research and understanding that the emotional side of celiac disease is very real and very valid. And I just think it's cool that there's finally some research out there investigating this, and hopefully there's more to come, and I'll keep you guys updated on it. So the science is literally, proving that this is not something that's just made up in our heads, having anxiety with celiac disease. And we'll get more into specifically my personal experience with it in this episode. Now it's time for our gluten-free fave of the week. You guys, I actually remembered to bring this product in person into the studio. So if you're watching on YouTube, you will see that I've brought my gluten-free fave of the week. I'm so obsessed with her. It's the Honey Stinger Energy Waffle. They have gluten-free versions. I specifically have been loving the cinnamon flavor. I think I mentioned to you guys, but I'm a runner, and you have to have some fuel, especially before your long runs. And usually I have a banana in the mornings, but I was traveling, as I mentioned, in Vail last weekend, and I went to the general store to pick up something that I could eat before my run, and they didn't have bananas. So I was just looking around, and I've seen people talk about these Honey Stinger waffles so much on social media, so I was influenced. I bought it, and I was obsessed. It gave me so much energy, but it's super light, but it's also a lot of carbs. It's not perfect. It does have added sugars, but you win some, you lose some. You can't be completely perfect without having added sugars. And it tastes delicious. So I'm a Honey Stinger gluten-free waffle fan. Let me know what flavor you like. They also have the non-gluten-free versions, the regular versions, I guess is what you would call it if you don't have celiac disease, but I love these waffles. I can't wait to have them more for my long runs. I just ordered a 16-pack, so I'm excited about those, and I will have them linked in the show notes if you want to go check them out. And without further ado, let's get into the meat of the episode. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's two ways that I really think about in terms of examining how celiac and anxiety are connected. There's the physical link. So that's like what happens in the body. Anxiety is a neurological symptom of celiac disease. And then there's the emotional side that comes with just trying to manage a gluten-free diet. So first, I'm going to dive into the physical link. So what is actually happening in the body if you have celiac disease and you ingest gluten and you're experiencing anxiety as a symptom of gluten exposure. I didn't know for the longest time that anxiety was a symptom of celiac disease. And when I found out about it, it truly changed my life because I was just like, everything makes sense now. Growing up, I had no concept of the gut-brain connection. I feel like that's not something they really teach you in school, but it's something that I've learned about just in the past few years doing more of my own research on wellness. So one, understanding that there is a connection between your gut and your brain is super important. That affects people that don't have celiac disease or any sort of dietary restriction or intolerance. That's just anybody. So of course, it's also going to affect people with celiac disease. And also, when you're examining your symptoms, it's really hard to quantify brain fog and anxiety, especially growing up. Like, I just thought that was what life was supposed to feel like because I had always felt brain fog and anxiety. And it took me a while to figure out that I was even having those symptoms to begin with. I didn't have the vocabulary to really talk about that. It also took me a while to figure out and separate anxiety just because like sometimes you get anxiety in life, and then anxiety because of gluten exposure and inflammation. So it took me a while to like really get in tune with my body to figure out which was which. And now that I'm 26 and I just know more about myself, I'm really able to decipher that, and realizing that anxiety was a symptom of celiac disease was just so validating and also really motivating in terms of being stricter and more disciplined with my gluten-free diet, because I really started to notice a difference in how I felt and how I was able to approach every day, because having anxiety isn't really that fun. So once you experience not having anxiety, you're like, oh, this is amazing. I need to keep doing this. So the first thing to really dive into here is the gut-brain axis. The gut and the brain are constantly communicating through what is called the gut-brain axis. So, it's just like a road of nerves, hormones, and immune signals. So when your gut is inflamed or irritated, like it is with untreated celiac or having celiac and getting gluten exposure or cross-contamination, those inflammatory signals can actually travel to the brain and affect your neurotransmitters like serotonin, which is what regulates your mood and anxiety. So we're getting a little sciencey here, but about 90% of serotonin is made in the gut, not the brain. So when your intestines are damaged or inflamed, it can disrupt your serotonin production and lead to mood changes, anxiety, and even depression. So like if your gut is unhappy and inflamed, your brain immediately feels the effects of that, hence the gut-brain connection. So this is applicable to anyone. Like inflammatory foods can cause inflammation in your gut and then therefore in your brain, but it's really heightened in people with celiac disease, obviously, because the gut gets so inflamed, like the inflammation is insanely intense when your body ingests gluten. So that's how the gut and the brain are connected, and why anxiety and brain fog and fatigue are neurological symptoms of celiac disease. And no, it's not made up in your mind. So for people with celiac, as I've mentioned, and as most of you probably know, even small amounts and traces of gluten can trigger an autoimmune response. The body is basically attacking its own small intestine whenever gluten is exposed. But that inflammation doesn't just stay in the small intestines. It's really systematic, so it can affect your entire body, including your nervous system. That's really why you have those neurological symptoms after gluten exposure. Other things that could happen along with anxiety or brain fog or difficulty concentrating, fatigue or low energy, headaches or migraines, mood swings or irritability. This is just all due to like the inflammation that's altering how your brain is processing information and emotions, which can make your anxiety just feel more intense. There's even research showing that gluten-related inflammation can change blood flow and immune activity in the brain. So that's that like foggy feeling that people describe as like brain fog. I think I actually mentioned this in my first podcast episode, but I had a lot of celiac symptoms my first year post-grad when I was 22. And I didn't really realize it was connected at the time because I thought I was being 100% gluten-free. But essentially, this is what happened. When I was 22, I discovered overnight oats, and I was literally so obsessed with them. So obsessed. Like when I find a food that I'm obsessed with, I literally have it every day for years and I never get bored of it. And I thought overnight oats were the perfect breakfast. I had it literally every single morning for an entire year. And it wasn't until I met with a dietitian again, following some elevated blood work in a routine celiac appointment, where I went through everything that I ate in a day. And she was like, girl, oats are not safe for people with celiac disease because of the cross contact. And literally my mind was blown because I had no idea that I was giving myself gluten every single morning. And all of that to say, to set the scene, I remember that year I had the worst anxiety. Like, I remember I was terrified to go on public transportation. It was really debilitating anxiety that I had never really felt. At the time, I honestly just thought I was a little crazy because I had no idea it was connected to what I was eating, and that I was literally exposing myself to gluten every single morning. No wonder I was so anxious, because that's a direct neurological symptom of gluten exposure in people with celiac disease. I also remember I had other physical symptoms like really bad joint pain that I ended up going to physical therapy for. So there was a lot going on, but I'm just going to stick to just talking about the anxiety aspect for this episode. Looking back on that, it all makes sense because I was literally having gluten every single day. I just didn't realize it. And if I knew anxiety was a symptom of celiac disease at the time, I maybe would have made that connection earlier, but I truly had no idea. So again, just another example of how misinformation and lack of information or materials about celiac disease can really affect you even years after diagnosed, because one, I didn't know anxiety was a symptom of celiac disease, and two, I had no idea that the oats that I was eating every morning were actually not celiac safe. That's an example of celiac and anxiety in practice. Another aspect of this is just having celiac disease causes malabsorption. So your damaged intestines are just not absorbing the nutrients properly. And this can lead to deficiencies in key nutrients that affect your brain chemistry and nervous system function. So like if you have low iron, that can really affect your mood. If you're low in vitamin B, that can really affect different aspects of your brain, leading to anxiety, irritability, and brain fog. If you're deficient in magnesium, that's like a natural calming mineral that's regulating your stress hormones. So if you're low in that, that can be linked to higher anxiety and poorer sleep. So it's really important to work with your doctor on what supplements you should be taking to help counteract any malabsorption or deficiencies that you might have because of celiac disease. I personally have a robust supplement plan that I worked with my doctor and dietitian based on my blood work. So even with a strict gluten-free diet, it just takes time for your body to catch up from years of malabsorption and deficiencies. All right, a positive aspect to this though, once you're diagnosed and really strict about your gluten-free diet, your gut-brain communication really does improve over time. Your inflammation decreases, your nutrient absorption returns, and your neurotransmitters start to stabilize, which is why so many people that have anxiety as a result of celiac disease notice their symptoms start to improve once they follow a gluten-free diet. So that's super helpful. I mean, I've definitely noticed feeling night and day different in terms of my anxiety and brain fog and energy levels since being so strict about cross-contamination and being gluten-free. And, also I think going with that, beyond just being gluten-free, I've been more intentional about just having a healthier diet overall and a non-inflammatory diet and limiting processed foods, limiting added sugars and things like that, alcohol. All of that is connected, and that's super applicable to people that don't have celiac disease or a gluten-related disorder. But that's kind of the gist of the physical aspect of celiac disease and how that can really affect you and your anxiety symptoms. But even if you are following a gluten-free diet and your intestines are technically healed, there still can be lingering anxiety with celiac disease, not as a symptom of celiac disease, but more as a byproduct of managing celiac disease, especially around planning your meals, getting food, eating out with friends, restaurants. So that's really where the emotional and mental side of managing celiac disease comes in. So now I'm going to get to how anxiety can just show up whenever you're trying to manage celiac disease. For me, I think this was something I dealt with, especially once I became more aware of what my celiac symptoms were and how they were affecting me, because I became more vigilant of wanting to not have those symptoms anymore. So I was like super hyper-focused on being gluten-free, which is important, but there's a balance and a line between being disciplined and intentional with managing your gluten-free lifestyle and getting to a point where it just kind of takes over your life and it's like, okay, like you need to live your life at some point and you can't be anxious about this all the time. You need to really find the perfect balance of managing it in a disciplined way without letting it give you anxiety. And it can be really difficult to figure that out for yourself. And every person is different and how they choose to manage it. I know some people don't go to restaurants. That would not work for me. I respect if that's what works for other people, but it really can feel like living with celiac disease is a full-time job. You do have to constantly have it on your mind, and that alone can just create chronic stress and anxiety. You really have to think, like, every time you eat, is this safe? Did they change the fryer? Did they really understand what gluten-free means or cross-contamination? And it's just like this constant calculation in your mind that you can never really turn off. Sometimes you can get to this place where you're just like living in fear of cross-contamination or accidental gluten exposure. And it can just lead to social anxiety or just feeling different and isolated. For me, when I was younger, this showed up in the way that I was kind of in denial about celiac disease for a long time, as I mentioned in my first episode. So I almost had anxiety about it in the sense that I was procrastinating managing it, and I knew that I was hurting myself. So I would intentionally eat fries that were cross-contaminated, and then it would make me anxious because I'm like, okay, I knew I shouldn't have done that. And then now, as an adult, I'm learning more about celiac and I'm super disciplined with it. It can create anxiety in the opposite way where I'm hyper aware and maybe sometimes you just need to take a breath and just live a little bit, and mistakes are bound to happen and you just have to remember that. There's always something. I think, I mentioned I don't really get a ton of anxiety with gluten right now, but there is one thing that actually still does give me anxiety. And I think I actually mentioned these in my last episode. It's the wheat-based straws that they often serve in drinks in New York City. They give me so much anxiety because whenever I go out, I just never know what type of straw I'm going to get. And I don't get the wheat straws often enough where I feel like I need to make a point whenever I order a drink to ask them what straw the drink is coming out in. But there have been multiple times where I get a drink, it arrives at my table, and it has the wheat-based straw in the drink, and I have to ask the waiter to send the drink back, make the drink again, and bring it back to me without the straw. Honestly, it's the most anxiety-inducing thing because it's just the weirdest possible thing to try and explain to a waiter. I literally have been looked at like I'm a crazy person for requesting that. Like I don't even know how to explain the feeling, but anytime I've asked a waiter to make me a new drink because I'm allergic to the straw, they literally look at me like I'm insane. And I don't blame them. It is a little crazy, but that's just the reality of it, is that the wheat-based straw contaminates the drink, so I need a fully new drink if a drink comes out with the wheat-based straw. And it's just a whole thing. So that's really the only situation that gives me anxiety these days with celiac disease. But other than that, I feel like I'm very used to all of the interactions that come with having celiac disease, and it doesn't bother me. And I think that just comes with time. So maybe with time, I'll get used to the straw thing. So one of the biggest anxiety triggers for people with celiac is just the fear of cross-contamination and the fear of trusting in other people. So it's just difficult sometimes to explain what celiac is to a waiter, to a family member, to a friend. It can just lead to this anticipatory anxiety. So you're worrying before anything happens, before you go out to eat or something, that you might have accidental gluten exposure. I've definitely had this a bunch. Whenever I visit my family or share an Airbnb with friends, I'm definitely a little stressed about cross-contamination in the kitchen, and I make a point to think about that because there's just a lot going on, people accidentally using the same knife for gluten bread and gluten-free bread. Now everyone in my life that I'm close with understands cross-contamination, so I don't feel crazy for requesting that they comply with cross-contamination needs, but it's just so easy for people to unintentionally forget because it's not on the top of their mind. So it can just be difficult to be vigilant about that, especially now since I'm used to living alone and having my own kitchen. So that's something that can create anxiety for people. Also, just social situations can feel more complicated, like going to restaurants, parties, work events. Things that should be fun could just trigger embarrassment or stress. Sometimes people could avoid social situations because they're just worried about staying safe with their gluten-free diet. So maybe people with celiac disease might say no to more plans or feel like they can't go out to eat with friends. For me, growing up as a kid, I think it can be embarrassing. I really felt very othered having celiac disease and having to have a special version of everything everywhere I went. And I really hated it. And for me as a kid, that showed up not by skipping social events, but by just fully cheating on the gluten-free diet because I didn't want to be singled out for having a special version of something. It could also totally go the other way in children where maybe they stop wanting to go to social events because of the gluten-free diet. So, it shows up for everyone in a different way. This is also a little niche, but And maybe I'll get more into this in another episode, but I'm Catholic, and in the Catholic Church, you have communion, which is consecrated bread, which has wheat in it, so it's not gluten-free. And so growing up, after I was diagnosed with celiac, I had to receive a special version of communion at church every day, which meant I had to go up and get singled out in front of everyone at church and get my own special communion. And I remember it gave me so much anxiety every Sunday because I was like, oh, I just want to be normal. I just want to go through the line with everyone else. This is just, I hated it. It made me dread going to church, as bad as that sounds. And now I don't even have communion because it's technically only low gluten. They're unable to give you a communion that's fully gluten-free. But again, maybe I'll get into that in another episode further down the line. That's a very, very niche topic. But all of that to say, I think anxiety and isolation can show up differently when you're a kid versus when you're an adult. I don't really feel this as much now, but I think with children, you're just kind of always wanting to fit in. So I think it can be more difficult to manage maybe as a child. Also, just being gluten-free and managing celiac can really shift your identity. It does become a part of your identity, whether you want it to or not. I mentioned in the first episode, I did not want to be known as a celiac girl. Now here I am making a whole podcast about it because it is a part of my identity, and that's okay. It's also a part of your daily life. It's a part of your lifestyle. It's a part of what you have to do every day. You sometimes can't be as spontaneous as maybe you would want to or go with the flow. You have to plan more, and you can just feel resentment, guilt, or even grief for the spontaneity that you lost in your life. Also, a lot of people with celiac can report feeling misunderstood, even by friends or family who just don't grasp how serious it is. I feel like it's super common for people to be like, oh, just have a little bit, it's not a big deal. And I'm just like, oh, actually, I can't have it. And I've gotten to the point now where it doesn't bother me. If other people in my life don't take it seriously, that's fine. I just need to take it seriously for myself, but that can really affect people or lead people to feeling misunderstood. I also feel like something that comes up a lot is that people interpret being gluten-free as being healthier, and they like to just poke fun at you for being gluten-free because they're like, oh, you're so healthy. And I'm like, well, that's really not the point. I'm just having the salad because that's all I can eat. So a lot of people just don't understand that it really isn't a choice to be gluten-free if you have celiac disease, which can just be frustrating sometimes. There's also just some research I want to share with you guys. So studies show that people with celiac disease are up to twice as likely to experience anxiety disorders compared to the general population. Another study from the Celiac Disease Foundation found that fear of cross-contamination and lack of social understanding were the two biggest predictors of mental health challenges in celiac patients. Again, this just kind of shows it is a normal psychological response to living with a chronic illness that requires 24/7 vigilance. It's a lot to manage every single day. You might feel perfectionist about it, kind of I talked about in my last episode. Have to read every label, manage other people's perceptions of your diet, and there's just this fear of getting sick, fear of judgment, fear of being misunderstood, and that can just build a lot of pressure over time, and that hypervigilance just kind of keeps your body in this low grade fight or flight mode, which can just lead to fatigue, poor sleep, and brain fog, and it's just kind of a cycle. All of that to say, I think awareness with this is the first step. These feelings are so normal, and so many people with celiac disease are going through the same thing if this is something that you're relating to. I think it's good to just be aware of this, and once you realize that this is something that's affecting you, you can start to work on tools that just help you feel calmer in your life and not be stressed about it all the time. Now I'm going to get into some tangible tips for what's really helped me with managing anxiety and fatigue in celiac disease, because as I mentioned, I really don't feel anxious about celiac disease these days, which is amazing. And I want that for all of you, okay? So first, you really just kind of need to have a mindset shift. You can't live in fear. You really have to feel empowered to just take control of your health. And I think that comes through just education and information, which again, is why we're sharing all of this info on the podcast. Something that I just kind of realized and framed in my mind is that I can only manage what I can control. I live this way with just my life in general, but especially with celiac disease. And what I can't control is just not worth worrying about or being anxious about. It's almost like the let them, Mel Robbins theory, if you know, you know. You could really live in fear, or you could just live focusing on what you can control. And that's what I choose to do. And that mindset has really changed everything for me, because things are bound to happen. Like, you're always going to have an accidental gluten exposure, unfortunately, no matter how hard you prepare. You're never going to be perfect. If you do have a gluten exposure, just treat it as a learning experience for how you can improve in the future. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just try your best. There's no sense in living in anxiety or fear of what might happen, because that's just a waste of your time. You really do just get to that point where you just need to live your life and not let anxiety about gluten get in the way. Don't let it keep you from going out to the restaurant, having fun social plans, going on dates. You need to just go for it. Ways to do this is you can just create systems and routines that reduce anxiety. I know I keep referencing the ChatGPT episode, but definitely go look at that, because that just helps you save time, which helps take the mental load off of managing celiac disease. One thing that I actually really want to talk about is with eating at restaurants. Whenever I was younger, eating at restaurants would give me so much anxiety, because I was so worried that I was going to not like the gluten-free options on the menu. And really what changed my mindset with this is just learning to be perfectly content with whatever gluten-free option is on the menu. It's really, really challenging, I think, in this day and age to find a restaurant that has absolutely no gluten-free options. And I'm talking a normal sit-down restaurant, not fast food. I don't really do fast food these days. I remember growing up and going out to eat with my family, and I remember going to the bathroom to sob when I was 12 because I couldn't have the pasta or something. We would go to an Italian restaurant and all I could eat was a salad. And I remember being so upset about it and just going to the bathroom and sobbing. And it's okay, that's a little dramatic. You have something you can eat. You can eat a salad. And going out to a restaurant isn't so much about enjoying the food as it is about enjoying the company. So there's no reason to go to the bathroom and cry about having to eat a salad. Just enjoy being with your family at the restaurant, But for some reason, whenever I was younger, I hated salads, really because it was often the only gluten-free option that they had at restaurants. And I remember I would always be so anxious before going to a restaurant, because I'd be oh, I don't know what's going to be gluten-free. And what if they only have salads? Then I'm just going to have an awful time. That's a terrible mindset to be going in with. And I'm going to give myself grace because I was literally 12, but I would really depend on my happiness on if the restaurant had yummy gluten-free options. So for example, at Mexican restaurants, Mexican food is actually pretty gluten-free friendly, but a lot of times there's cross-contamination in the fryer with the tortilla chips. And I loved tortilla chips. I loved tortilla chips growing up. And I would seriously get the biggest anxiety before going out to eat at a Mexican restaurant, because I'd be oh my gosh, what if they say the chips aren't gluten-free because of cross-contamination? That would give me the biggest pit in my stomach. And I would get so upset if I got to the restaurant and I couldn't have the chips or I couldn't have the fries because they were cross-contaminated. And I think it just took me a while to kind of learn that I just need to be okay with whatever the gluten-free option is. I don't need to tie my happiness or enjoyment of the meal to what actual food that I'm eating. And I really just have changed my whole mindset with food, with having celiac disease. Food for me is kind of more of a means to an end rather than a means for actual enjoyment. I enjoy food, but if I'm going out to eat at a restaurant, I'm going more so for the experience and for connecting with friends or family. So reframing food in your mind as just kind of the secondary thing if you're going out to eat really just helps you not get disappointed if there's something on the menu that you would have enjoyed if they were able to make it gluten-free. And just having that mindset has just helped me in terms of being perfectly fine with eating whatever. Now I'm perfectly fine always having a salad anywhere I go out to eat. So I'm perfectly content going to an Italian restaurant and them not having gluten-free pasta and I just get a salad. That's totally fine with me. I've gotten to the point where restaurants for me are more about the aesthetic rather than the actual food. And that's the mindset that works for me. I, understand if not everyone wants to have that mindset. I get it. But having that mindset has been super helpful for me. Another thing that I think is really important is just taking care of yourself beyond being gluten-free. I think there's so much more that you need to do to manage celiac rather than just being gluten-free, because at the end of the day, you do have a chronic health condition. So I think it's important to just prioritize your health and your lifestyle. So for me, that shows up as daily exercise and movement, focusing on nutrition beyond just the gluten-free diet. So having a protein-rich breakfast, because it really is all connected. I also like going to yoga, meditation classes, and I also really like focusing on getting 8 hours of sleep because your body really does need it. And lastly, something that's really helpful in managing the anxiety that comes with celiac disease is just community. Community makes everything easier. Again, that's another big reason why I wanted to start this podcast. I hope this online community, the Celiac Diaries podcast and Substack and newsletter and everything can be that for you. Hopefully I can be like your online celiac bestie if you don't actually know anyone in your real life that is gluten-free or has celiac disease. Just to summarize this entire episode, I feel like we got into so many different things here. The gut-brain connection is real. Remember that. Anxiety is a valid part of the celiac experience. You're not alone. This is so normal to deal with. You can overcome it and live a calmer life with celiac disease. It is possible. You can just develop those tools and habits to make managing anxiety with celiac disease easier because, again, it is possible to live a calm, thriving celiac life and have fun and just focus on living. This was such a good episode. I feel like I got a lot off my chest. This was such a great little chat. Please comment down below or share in DMs, share on Instagram your own experiences with anxiety related to celiac disease. Let's all stay connected in the comments and support each other. If you liked this episode, please give it a 5-star rating. Share it with a friend, especially if they have celiac or gluten-free. I am so excited about continuing this podcast. I've been so lucky with the reception so far, and I'm just so grateful that you guys are finding this helpful, and I want to continue to make it helpful. So again, please don't be shy, and don't forget to follow the show so you don't miss next week's episode. I post every single Wednesday. We're consistent, guys, so don't you worry, we're not going away. This was such a great episode. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Celiac Diaries podcast. I hope you're leaving with a tip, a story, or just a little inspiration to live your best life with celiac. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, or leave a review. I'll see you back here next Wednesday. And until then, stay well.